I mean, have you guys heard of BTS? Whoa, Blackpink. Like she's danced with them and choreographed for them. She's a co-owner of her studio with her sister, Rūts Studio in Koreatown. You guys could go learn directly from her. But she's gonna come up, she's gonna share her creative process on how she makes a dance.
Okay, so thank you. So it's just a compilation of just some of the things that I do, some environments that I'm in. But let's just go into maybe the next slide. I just want to show you guys just some of the variety of roles that I have as a creator and as a dancer. So obviously the first one will be a professional dancer. That means dancing for artists on stage or for music videos, et cetera, et cetera. The role of a choreographer is, actually creating the dance that people are dancing to. Instructor, so I teach classes. Creative director, that kind of is like an overall, if someone comes to me with like, hey, can you think of the creative vision for this entire video? It might not be limited to just the dance portion, but that's an overall creative director. Movement coach, that's working with artists or performers and just walking them through how to look more natural on camera. I'm a studio owner as well, so that's a whole entrepreneurial endeavor, but we can talk more about that later. And then I'm also a team director, so that's going out to competitions, setting choreography on students and dancers for whole teams. And then mentorship comes in so many different forms. It can be straightforward as like maybe a private lesson, but also one-on-one relationships, doing course programs, intensives, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a variety of things. So when I thought about what I wanted to share today, I felt that more than maybe the detailed process of how I create one piece of choreography, because I feel like that might be very, very specific, I'd rather kind of share the bigger picture of how maybe my faith bleeds into every single one of these roles. And I think that'll be kind of maybe easier to resonate with whatever industry that you all are in. So when Christians talk about their creative process, I feel like most people expect something very straightforward like this. So number one, you get in tune with your emotions, right? Because at the end of the day, creative expression is kind of known to be like, okay, something to do with your emotions. Step two, inviting God into the process through prayer or worship, etc. And then number three, creating an artistic product to express your current emotional state. And though a lot of Christian creatives do have this process, I feel like for me personally, I'm a little bit different. So I will say this might sound a little unconventional. Just stay with me here. I don't necessarily think that dance is an emotional outlet for me in the sense of maybe, sometimes on a given day, if I feel sad, and then I choose a sad song, and then I choreograph something that expresses sadness. That would be more of like a straightforward step-by-step process if dance were more of like an emotional outlet for me. But I feel like, to be honest, when I choreograph, I just make moves that make me feel cool. So then what is my thought process then? And why am I up here? Why do I even create? I feel like talking about the more general mindset and posture, I think, is something that I feel like would be a lot more relatable. So I once read something in a book that kind of changed my entire life. It says, wisdom, this is good, listen, it's so good. Wisdom and creativity are related subjects in the Bible. In fact, creativity is a manifestation of wisdom in the context of excellence and integrity. Wisdom is personified in Proverbs 8 and is a companion of God at the creation of all things. Therefore, wisdom and creativity must not be separated in the mind of the believer. So good, right? So I feel like when we bring up the idea of being a creative, I think most of us correlate that to making something artistic, right? And I think Bill Johnson, in this book, he goes on to talk about how creativity actually is the ability to identify lack and problems in the world around you, and to creatively think of practical solutions to solve those things, right? So it's kind of crazy to think about it that way. I think that's pretty phenomenal because, like we said, most people think creative equals art. But thinking of practical solutions for the people around you actually can be done by anybody on any given day. in any field. You can be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, you could be a school teacher, you can be whatever it is that you are. And that process of providing solutions for people and to have that role, I think, is creativity at its core. But I think that a lot of times we trick ourselves and we're like, well, we're not creative because I don't do art. Like I'm not good at drawing, I'm not good at painting, I'm not good at singing. And so I just think that that's good to dwell on, because for me, that even though I do happen to be in the arts, right, I do think that the base foundation of it all is that mindset for me. So the question of why do I create is, to me, kind of like the same concept of why do I live, which sounds kind of corny, but it's to know God and to be like God, and then to love and edify people, right? I feel like that's like kind of just the base missional reason why I live. So, creating is in God's DNA, right? He created the entire universe, just in case you missed that in the Bible. But, and for me, like, choosing to create every day is a choice for me to learn how to adopt God's DNA. I'm learning to be more like him just by doing that. And so the last step would be like, okay, how can I love and edify people through what I do? And how can I exercise my own creativity and my own wisdom in all that I do? And how does dance do that for me, particularly? So just some examples. In my teaching, for example, when I teach class, I'm creatively thinking of ways to explain, like breaking down the body and explaining to students like how to execute dance better. Right? In my choreography, Tim mentioned this earlier, but you're creating something that doesn't exist yet, and you're putting that into the world. Maybe I'm creating a new dance move or a new technique or a new thought process that I can pave the way for others who are learning from me. I think, when I coach or mentor others, that's a lot of relationally one-on-one. Just by talking to them and really getting to know them on a deeper level, I can even identify in what areas they lack in maybe their sense of identity, and I play a part in speaking identity and life over them. Even a few weeks ago, I taught class, and at the end of class, someone came up to me and started asking me dance advice on like a particular move that I taught. And as I'm explaining how to execute that move better, God just gives me a word for them. And so I shared it with her, and it hit home, like it resonated with her. I won't go into the details of it, but even stuff like that, I'm like, it really had nothing to do with what piece I actually taught that day, actually. It had everything to do with like in what ways I'm posturing my heart to bring faith and God into every interaction that I have. It's in dance settings, right? But for example, sometimes I dance to secular music, and sometimes people have their own opinions about that. That can be a whole other conference, a whole other discussion. But for me, it's about the posture of the heart. How am I inviting God into every single one-on-one interaction, every single opportunity? It's not about the products that I'm creating, but more in all that I do. How is God taking a part of that, right? Do you guys resonate? Yeah. So I think being a business owner, now that's also a whole different discussion, but I think that's really opened my eyes to see how creativity really plays a part in what you're cultivating and the environment that you're cultivating. Me and my sister Deanie, we talk a lot about students who come to us all the time with these stories of, hey, I was actually going through depression, I was actually going through a lot of unhappiness, and I just feel like when I started taking class in your space, something shifted. And actually, I'm a lot happier now. And I went through a healing process because I started taking classes here. And for us, we were like, what? Like, we didn't even really do anything. But at that point, it's realizing like whatever it is that I'm doing in all that I'm doing, I'm cultivating an environment for people. And that has to do with maybe how the spreadsheets that I'm working on and how to run my business better and the systems that I'm trying to change and cultivate for people. Like, that doesn't seem so creative and fancy, but all of those decisions bleed into what kind of space I'm cultivating for people and how missional of a space that could be. So I just feel like, I want us to broaden our mind of how our creativity can actually affect the space around us, because it's, like I mentioned before, it's really not about what product I'm offering. Is it good enough? Is it not good enough? We struggle with that all the time as creatives. Is it Christian enough? Is it not Christian enough? Like all these guidelines. And it really is about like this. Actually, let me just close with this. One life motto that I really want to live by is, I create because I am, not because I do. I think that at the end of the day, it all goes back to my sense of identity, my knowledge of who God is, and how, at the end of the day, that does overflow into what I make. But without knowing who God is and what I am, my creativity is pretty limited, There's even a story of how I've went through like a foot injury before, and it really rocked my world in a bad way because I couldn't dance. I was just going through it, and I realized like there's a whole story behind that. God really mentioned to me like, this foot injury is actually not a physical injury. It's actually a manifestation of your inner soul state. I was like going through a lot of just gunk, right? So even then I realized, it's more about the relational state with God that allows creativity to flow. Without that, I'm physically limited. I can't even create at my highest level anymore. And so, again, just going back to this concept, like it's not about what I make and what I do, but the first and foremost process and foundational thing is nurturing my relationship with God and allowing that to seep into everything that I do. So I didn't quite get to share much of the actual like step-by-step creative process. A lot of training. I step into a room, I make what I gotta make, but I just do my best to invite the presence of God into every step of the way, and also understand how the presence of God is how I'm providing a space where people can step into the presence of God in any space that I walk into. So that's just a little bit of insight into more of like the mindset, I guess, not as much the practical ways that I do create. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, for having me. Yeah. Thank you.